there, and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. This is season 16, episode 63, the second one today, but it came on a short notice. David Bailey, CEO of BTC Media, the mastermind behind Nakamoto, the BTC Treasury company, and the guy who was telling us to vote for Trump last year is here. And also this episode is sponsored by Unstoppable Wallets, Sideshift.ai, Bitcoin.com News, not Bitcoin Magazine News, Bitcoin.com News, Layer 2 Labs, and Nuance.com. Thank you very much for being here, David.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me back.
It's actually funny because Bitcoin.com is now an orange website, and you sort of started this trend in 2018, I think. I remember that article.
Yeah.
I think Christy Harkin wrote that, like a piece which basically told the whole story of Bitcoin Magazine and how it started only covering Bitcoin, and then a bunch of projects launched, and there was a pressure to also include them, and then you decided, okay, let's just focus on Bitcoin. I think that was sort of pivotal for the industry.
Yeah, man. I think it was definitely pivotal for the company. I think it's probably the best decision we ever made, and it put us on the trajectory to where we are now. And I think it's when you do things that you believe in, and you find purpose from, and it helps you manage the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. It's like, entrepreneurship's a pendulum, and it just swings all the time, and it's tough. And if you don't like what you're doing and you don't believe in it, you're not going to make it, in my opinion. So and we almost didn't make it. I mean, that was like we almost went bankrupt in 2018, and it was really like
And
we almost went
2020, I remember
bankrupt.
that.
Yeah. 2020, we it was like the business was like in a nosedive, and then we pivoted the strategy to just focus on Bitcoin, and we were like coming back, and then COVID hit, and it's like, okay, well, our whole business was built around an event, and that almost killed us. But we were, our customers and our attendees were nice enough to all like roll their tickets and sponsorships to the next conference, which gave us like time to figure it out. And then yeah, dude, then that like was the next part of the quest, was us, trying to find any place in the country that would let us host a conference during a pandemic. And we had to go all the way to Florida to find a place. And I think that Bitcoin 2021 was really one of the coolest conferences ever, in my opinion. Not had lots of flaws and production flaws or whatever, but in terms of just like the vibes and the energy, it was just incredible. And that conference was like 12,000-ish people, and the biggest conference we had done before that was 2,000. And so going from like a 2,000 person conference to a 12,000 person conference it's a very big jump. Like, it's a lot harder. And so that kind of was like us. I think at 12,000 people, we were the biggest conference in the industry. So we kind of went from like the small conference, and Consensus was the big dog, to like we were the number one conference. And yeah, ever since, we just keep trying to like kind of push the boundaries forward.
Yeah, and right now you have a conference in Amsterdam, you have one in Abu Dhabi, and the one that usually...
Hong Kong.
Oh, Hong Kong too. That's amazing. Yeah. And
So
what I like
the
about
goal is
them
to
is
try to
that
do one
you
in
sort of
every
get
market.
locals. It's not the same people traveling to all of these locations. You get people who wear what's the term for it? Like traditional Arab clothes at the Abu Dhabi event, and you get a lot of East Asian people in Hong Kong, and of course the American
We
conference
try.
is very American, with a lot of speakers and politicians. And that's also something for which you don't get much credit. You got a lot of politicians on stage, and people hate you for it, but you got them to say nice things about Bitcoin, which was something new.
I think first off, like in terms of just like the conferences being local, I don't think they're local enough. We try really hard to make them local, but like there's a little bit too much of like, everyone wants to hear from Michael Saylor. Everyone, like, there's certain personalities that everyone wants to hear from, and I still think they're too American in general. But in time they'll get more and more local, and I think like that's one thing we got to do a better job at, is like when we do the conferences, it's really just like 3 days or 2 days that we like own in a location, and the other 360 days in a year, we don't really do anything there. And so there needs to be more incubation of each of these markets, and more, startups and accelerators, and just like building a robust local ecosystem. Yeah, that's one of my personal goals, is to try to make it where, the entire Bitcoin ecosystem is very diversified across cultures, geographies, types of people, backgrounds. I think that makes it more robust and rich. Yeah, and then in terms of like, getting politicians to talk about Bitcoin, oh man, there's a lot to unpack there. I think uh at the end of the day, it's like, you know, uh we can either complain about how the political system works, or we can just recognize how it works and then play the same game, and that every other industry plays, and secure the victories that we can secure to make life a little bit more manageable for people, and to make the industry grow a little bit faster. But I'm not under the illusion that, politics is the answer to our problems. If I thought that, then we wouldn't need Bitcoin. It's just like reform the political system. But um, I do think, in a broader kind of just macro way, I think the Trump embracing Bitcoin, um, it kind of feels like Emperor Constantine embracing Christianity, um, you know, uh, 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 during the Roman Empire. It's like it's really like we've reached a level of just size of our movement that like we can't be stopped, and it's just um inevitable that the power structures of the world have to embrace it rather than fight it. And I feel like it's a sea change that has come. And when I travel to like these different, conferences that we host and talk to people locally, dude, the fact that the US president has embraced Bitcoin has impacted the perception of Bitcoin everywhere. And I thought that it might be like a blip, like, people are excited about it at first, and then over time they care less. But I actually think it's the opposite. Like, as time has gone on, it actually has mattered more. Like, more people said something to me about it in Abu Dhabi this year than said something to me about it last year, even though last year that conference was like 1 month after the election. And so it's kind of like information can take a long time to travel, and like also for people to react to information and to like reposture how they even talk about Bitcoin or think about Bitcoin. And so like as that metastasizes, it just takes time. And I think like next year, the impact of the president being the first, Bitcoin president will be even a bigger impact next year. So, you know, uh it sucks to say that like dealing with the political system is beneficial, but it is beneficial. So
But at the same time, I do have to grill you a bit because the expectations were much higher in terms of price. And you are tweeting about the massive bull market that's going to come once Trump wins. We did get like an increase. We did get to 125K within the first year of the Trump presidency. But now it seems like, at least this is my perception, that the momentum is sort of gone. And I want to ask you, what went wrong? Why do you think we're not at 1 million yet, which is what you predicted, not this year, but during the Trump presidency?
So, I didn't predict 1 million during the Trump presidency. I just thought like, and I still do, that $1 million is possible. I think that $1 million is more likely to happen over, a 5-year time horizon or 10-year time horizon. But I think, first off, I don't know, it's a complicated question. A lot has gone right. Like, first off, like I wouldn't change anything about what we did. Um, we got a lot accomplished. Probably the thing I'm most proud about is Ross getting pardoned. And I think that, I said this from the get-go, like if that was the only thing that we achieved, like that would be worth it. but we got a lot more done than that. And I think, I've been very impressed with the president's, let's say, perseverance. In he's gotten a lot of blowback for supporting the industry and supporting, different people within the industry. But I think like he made the right decisions to like pardon CZ, to I don't know what like the settlement basically that was reached with Roger. I thought that was a great outcome.
Also, Arthur
Um,
Hayes, and
Arthur
there were a
Hayes.
few others.
Yeah, so like that's awesome. And I saw the comments about the Samurai devs, and that's a situation I haven't gotten involved in just because I've been dealing with my own problems that I have to handle first. But I think there's like a pretty good chance that he acts there. And so it's like uh uh it's awesome to have someone in the power structure that like doesn't treat us like we're criminals, and like can commensurate, because he's also been treated unfairly, and like he can commensurate with the people building stuff in our industry. So like I think what has disappointed certain parts of the Bitcoin and crypto coalition, first off, is like we haven't bought any Bitcoin for the strategic Bitcoin reserve, and I think that's like the biggest probably thing that people like wanted to see. I still think that it's going to happen, and there's like a team of people at the Treasury who this is like their full time job is to do this, but like I have learned enough about DC that it's like if the desire is there to do something, you can get it done quickly. Like even if it's unprecedented, even if it's like, oh well, there's all these reasons why we can't do it. Like there's a way to solve any problem as long as the political capital and need is there. So I think that's one issue. And I think, I'm starting to like think through kind of like what, the midterms are coming up in the US, and like that means a new campaign effort, and what opportunities are there for our industry to secure kind of another set of goals and things that we hope the president can deliver. And I think getting Bitcoin in the strategic reserve and doing it, you know, before the midterms is something we should try to make happen. So we'll see. We'll see. And then I think also the other big thing was like the let's say the president's crypto endeavors. Trump meme coin, Melania meme coin, World Liberty, whatever. And I kind of look at that in a slightly different light than maybe a lot of the Bitcoin grassroots does. Like, the president, there are a lot of people around the president who tell him a lot of things. He talks to a lot of people every day. Like that's really like his job, is talking to a lot of people. And if you just took like a sample of people that that are into Bitcoin and crypto that in real life, that you've like met before, like, and they were advising someone that you loved and respected on what they should do in Bitcoin and crypto, you would get a wide variety of different opinions about what someone should do. Like, you talk to a Bitcoiner, meme coins are the worst thing in the world. You talk to someone who's in the Solana vape cabal, I think is what they call it. It's like, oh, they love meme coins. And so the president's getting this feedback from all these different places, and at the end of the day, like he wants to just be supportive um of you know the industry. He wants to like endorse the industry effectively, and he's like an entrepreneur. So I feel like he sees these things not from the light of like, oh wow, we're going to do this Trump meme coin and it's not going to work out and it's going to become a liability for me. He looks at it from a completely different light, which I think um I can respect. And I feel like any person I've ever met that's gotten into Bitcoin goes through like a journey of like, okay, you're in Bitcoin, then you end up doing shit coins, then you end up doing like you go through all the different parts of the process. And ultimately you end up at the end of it like learning a lot about what's legit, what's not legit, why those things are legit. And I think that's the same journey he's on and his sons are on. And I think, ultimately the destination that this journey will lead them to is like they're going to become hardcore believers in Bitcoin in time. But like it's going to take them time and experience and exposure and like learning along the way, and mistakes will be made. So I think those are probably the two biggest things that have disappointed. But I think that like, in the scheme of things, like what he's accomplished has been incredible. And I think we should be thankful for that and not get too, let perfect be like, the destination, the only acceptable destination. Like we've made a lot of progress. He's gotten a lot done for us, and I'm eternally thankful and grateful for his, loyalty and follow through to the industry. So that was a very long-winded answer.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit to unpack there. The way in which I interpret the meme coins that Trump has launched, more or less directly, is that he sort of showed everyone that it's fine to issue a token. Like the former administration was very aggressive towards everything that was considered to potentially be a security. And these meme coins were maybe targeted depending on the volume. And Trump basically came out and said, okay, if I can do this, then you can do it too. Like,
exactly.
It's a way of showing clemency. Like the industry can move forward. I think crypto and AI and a lot of industries are blossoming right now, and they're trying to accelerate development because they don't know what's gonna come after this administration. But it's like a window of freedom where they can do a lot in a very short amount of time. So they're just pushing it, trying to accomplish as much as they can. I also like what's happening with privacy and the new narratives that are being pushed. Yesterday, there was a meeting at the SEC and they acknowledged that privacy is important and they said that Bitcoin is maybe too transparent, which I like. I think this is the way, this is how we get privacy into Bitcoin. First, of course, you get Zcash, which is gonna become like the poster child of privacy among these lobbyists and politicians. And then when Bitcoin does it, it's just gonna be normal. It's not gonna look like, well, we suddenly want to revert back to the Silk Road days or whatever. It's just gonna look normal, and it's something I respect. Anyway, I gotta plug a couple of ads and then I'll ask you a question. First, there's Siteshift.ai, which is the place where you can swap your stablecoins for actual sound money. I know that your conferences had a lot of stablecoins, and there were sound bites that people edited of Pete Rizzo, I think. He was like, stablecoins. Anyway, those are CBDC wannabes. They're not censorship resistant. Swap them on Siteshift. You don't have to touch gas tokens or whatever. You just send someone the stablecoin address and your Bitcoin address, and there's gonna be a swap. You receive Bitcoin to your
Let's
wallet.
go.
That's the way to do it. Forget about stablecoins. Just buy Bitcoin and check out Siteshift. There's also Layer 2 Labs, which does the Drivechain, and the message from them is that their BIP is not just a BIP, it's a piece of software that you can download. You go to layer2labs.com/download, and you find the Drivechain for a Zcash sidechain, for an Ethereum sidechain, for a prediction market, for a Namecoin type of sidechain. I think it's really interesting. You can try this as a weekend project. It's really cool. It runs on the Bitcoin Signet, but hopefully we can get it on the mainnet as soon as possible. And the one that I will plug here is noance.com, which is a peer-to-peer marketplace tailored for the Global South, whose CEO is Ray Youssef, formerly of Paxful. And he quit Paxful. He decided he wants to go all in on this mission to empower the Global South. So if you trade there, you're giving liquidity to people for whom the daily Bitcoin volatility is nothing compared to their regular fiat volatility. So check it out. It's noones.com. Now, David, there's a question in the chat from Mohit S. And it's sort of what a lot of people want to ask you. And they did on Twitter. And you always have an answer. And you're very optimistic and bullish and persistent, which I respect. But he asks, what are you doing regarding Nakamoto price crashing 99% and almost getting delisted?
Well, there's a lot I want to say to that question. Part of the challenge of being a public company is like I'm there are things that I cannot talk about or say publicly, and the right way for me to talk about them is through public filings. Like if I'm going to say anything that is actually a material answer to the question, like there's a proper way to do it and proper channels. And I hope that my attorneys see me say that on this in this interview, and they'll be very proud of me. So you know, first off, I'll just say, like, in terms of the stock price being down 99%, not that this is much better, but we did our pipe at $1.12 and at $5. You know, 99% down is like picking the absolute very top of the price of the stock, when I think the company was valued at, you know, $20 billion on a fully diluted basis, which was kind of insane. So the stock is down a lot. It sucks. But at the end of the day, you know, we can just control what we can control, which is just execute our strategy and acquire Bitcoin and continue to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible on a per share basis. And we have a strategy and a plan to do it. So we just got to execute it. And you know, the market environment sucks. The sentiment on treasury companies is bad. The sentiment on Bitcoin right now is bad. So, you know, those are headwinds that we have to deal with. But, you know, I've been in Bitcoin since $10. Like I've been through 70% drawdowns in Bitcoin. Like at the end of the day, if you are accumulating and building a balance sheet of Bitcoin, whether as an individual or as a company, you're going to be okay. So, you know, we are doing what we can, but you know, we can't control the stock price, and you know, like any more detailed of an answer that I could give on this, like, wouldn't be appropriate to do. So, it's probably the best answer I can give. I hope that satisfies the person who asked the question. I'm sorry if it doesn't.
Well, it's an answer. I'm not sure if it's exactly what they expect, but I also want to ask you, like, what's the point of a Bitcoin treasury company? Because to me, it sounds like the Seinfeld of companies. It's like, you know, that Seinfeld episode where they pitch an episode to CBS and they say it's a show about nothing, and they're like, "What do you mean nothing?" And he tries to explain, like, well, you just capture everyday life and it's about nothing. There's no plot, there's nothing there. And in the case of Bitcoin treasury companies, the business model is that they buy Bitcoin and they borrow money against it. Like there's no actual product, there's no actual service, it's just speculation mostly.
Well, you know, I would push back on a few of those things, and you know, I also think, like, in general, it doesn't quite apply to what we're trying to do at Nakamoto, because you know what we're trying to do at Nakamoto includes having operating companies that have products that generate income, and isn't, you know, non-dilutive source of capital where we can continue to grow our Bitcoin on our balance sheet by just operating the business. And you know, when I think in a macro sense, like what like about a Bitcoin treasury company, and really what is it? It's building a balance sheet of Bitcoin and then monetizing the Bitcoin, and that's effectively what a bank does. And so I think we're building Bitcoin banks, you know, as Hal Finney famously, you know, described. And I think that over time, these Bitcoin treasury companies will look more like um, Bitcoin native financial institutions, and we're just kind of in the opening innings. And I also think there's, you know, a lot of these that came to market that didn't have a plan or a vision of where they wanted to go, and so they're kind of like watching their peers to see what happens. And in a lot of ways, like, the treasury game just started. Like, we were the first one to make it to market. We went live in August. Um, Strive went live next. That was in September, I believe. Maybe it was October. Then after that, it was, uh, you know, we just had Jack Mallers and Pomps. They went live in December. And so, like, I feel like this group of treasury companies, they have a strategy and a vision, and they're more sophisticated than, like, let's say, a lot of the deals that just like speed ran to the market. Um, and so I think you got to give it time to see kind of how their strategies play out and which ones are effective, and like which ones kind of demonstrate product market fit. But, like, you know, also at the end of the day, like, just to the commentary of, like, these don't do anything in their current form other than buy Bitcoin. Well, you know, I think giving investors a vehicle to get Bitcoin exposure is a product in and of itself that is valuable. Like the Bitcoin ETF is the most successful ETF that's ever launched. Like there is absolutely demand from like mainstream normie investors to get exposure to Bitcoin, and they don't have, for a whole variety of reasons, but I mean, just structural friction keeps them from pulling capital from retirement accounts or brokerage accounts or their wealth managers and putting it into, you know, cold hard Bitcoin that they have the control of their own private keys of. So, you know, I do think, like, yeah, you might say it's speculation, you know, to the vast majority of the market, owning Bitcoin is speculation. You know, you're speculating on not just the potential of Bitcoin, you're also speculating on the decline of the existing monetary standard. So, and I think that if you look at ETFs as like a comparison, there's lots of strategies and approaches that ETFs use. Leverage, you know, covered call strategies. Like there's all sorts of ETF products that are out there. And so if you just kind of rebaked different versions of those, but with Bitcoin as the asset, you could develop like quite a portfolio of these. And then like every market is different. So like in a sense, every capital market globally needs a Bitcoin ETF or a Bitcoin ETF like product. So, you know, I think that in their current version, there's a value proposition, but it's limited in scope to solving like the structural friction that exists. And then I think what's coming next is like the actual monetization of the balance sheet, where I think you're going to see new business models emerge, and it's going to be very cool. It's going to be cool to watch. And you know, I had a conversation with Bruce Fenton. I don't know if you've been following his commentary on
I am.
treasury companies.
Actually, he's gonna be on the show
Yeah.
next week, I think.
So, I mean, I love Bruce. I mean, I've been friends with Bruce since, I don't know, 2013. He's an awesome guy. He has a good heart and soul. He's very smart. So I agree with a lot of the things that he's saying. Like I understand where he's coming from on them, but we had a good discussion about it. And you know, I do think that there's a case to be made for Bitcoin treasury companies to embrace the properties of Bitcoin more tightly. You know, I think there's a strong case to be made for Bitcoin treasury companies to self-custody. You know, I think there's a strong case to be made for Bitcoin treasury companies to be actually using Bitcoin tech, wallet functionality, multi-signature functionality, to create new financial primitives that are interesting and push the boundaries. So I think there's a lot that could be done. But like, you know, when I think about just BTC Inc. and the journey that I've been on for the past 13 or 14 years, like the driving, like underlying thread has always been to push Bitcoin forward. And at every stage of the journey, Bitcoin was like less legit than the stage we were that was ahead of us. You know, we're always trying to go to the next like level up. And so like, you know, in 2013 and 2012, like we were trying to like, you know, like reach beyond just the, you know, super technical developer and cypherpunk roots to like a broader audience and legitimize it to a broader audience. And then like after that, it was like we're trying to legitimize this to, you know, larger investors, venture capitalists, hedge funds. Then after that, it's like, okay, we're trying to legitimize this to corporations and, you know, have corporations buy in. And then like next is going to be like, we're trying to get governments to buy in. And so like, there's always been like this, like, how do we push it to the next level? And the thing about Bitcoin treasury companies is like, we're not waiting around for corporate America to decide they're going to embrace Bitcoin. Like, we're not waiting for Wall Street to decide they're going to embrace Bitcoin. We're going to take Bitcoin and we're going to bring it to Wall Street. And like, we're going to thrust it into the faces of the entire capital market. And there's nothing they can really do to stop us from taking Bitcoin to that next level. And so to me, it's like a very punk rock thing, actually, a Bitcoin treasury company, because it's like we are seizing control of the mechanisms of power, and we're thrusting Bitcoin upon the world. And I think that that's exciting. I think it's fun. I think it pushes the boundaries. I mean, it pushes the boundaries to such a degree that they're talking about changing index, eligibility rules for global securities to try to like block us from being included in indexes because we're vampire attacking the capital markets. And so it's that's kind of cool, and it's just like I think it's cool um to make the vision for Bitcoin real, and to not ask for permission, but to just do it.
Yeah, I respect this. At the same time, I will just quote Hal Finney on the exact thing that he said. In 2010, December 30th, so almost 15 years ago, he said, actually, there is good reason for Bitcoin-backed banks to exist, issuing their own digital cash currency redeemable for Bitcoins. So I think this is something that treasury companies are not doing yet, right? You cannot directly redeem the shares for Bitcoin.
No, but you can redeem the shares for equity, and that equity is a pro rata ownership of the Bitcoin that they hold. And so, you know, uh, it's they're not issuing bearer instruments. They're not offering redeemability, but the mechanisms are very similar. When you do a share buyback, in some sense, like that is a redemption like process.
Yeah, I get that. Maybe Hal Finney was thinking of something more cypherpunk. Maybe altcoins, where basically you have bridges between them and you can basically bridge your Bitcoin onto some other chain, like wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum right now or something. Maybe that's more like something that you would have envisioned at the time. But what you're doing is actually like a speculative attack on fiat currencies using Bitcoin and trying to bring it into institutions.
I think if you go back to like the start of modern banking and how it came about, like the precursor to banks were like bullion houses, and like we had a gold standard, and like gold was used as money in a medium of exchange and as a store of value. And um like we had financial institutions that built themselves around gold as the asset, and that morphed over time into the banking system we know today. But when you have pristine collateral like Bitcoin or gold, like you are sovereign in the sense of like the value that you hold is not a byproduct of any other system that's more powerful than you. Like, the gold that you hold is secured by the laws of physics. And so like from that perspective, like you have something of value that you can leverage to create additional value. And so, today when everything runs on the dollar, like at the end of the day, it's like it's one pyramid of liquidity that, at the absolute end of the day, the reserves, they ultimately they sit with the Federal Reserve. So it's like there is no sovereignty as a bank, because there is a power above you that ultimately makes the determinations and the decisions that affect you and like what types of business you can conduct. And so I think moving to a digital gold standard in the form of Bitcoin, um, we move to a banking system and a financial system that is much more self-sovereign, that is much more decentralized, that is much more where the economic actors are able to actually project their independent views, rather than they can't actually have that radical of a view because all of their money is sitting in a master account at the Federal Reserve. If that makes sense?
It sort of does. I also want to ask you, like, if Predator was here, and I'm not sure if he's gonna watch this or not, but I do see that he posts a lot about these treasury companies and he's never happy. And he did make some accusations that you guys spent millions of dollars on private jets and outlandish stuff, which seems very expensive for the average pleb who's following Predator. That's sort of his shtick. So, how do you respond to that? Was it part of the deal, or is it blown out of
So,
proportion?
so first off, as it relates to Predator, I've actually, I've had him blocked for probably a year and a half. I don't know, I forget why he's done lots of stuff that's pissed me off, but I unblocked him yesterday because I saw his take on I've tried to stay out of it, but this whole insanity around this cat proposal and BIP 110, and I mean this the stupidest stuff. I mean, this is literally the dumbest stuff I've seen
I was gonna get
in
to
a
that.
very long time. Very long time. And so uh anyway, I bit my tongue on this a lot, but like Predator had a perspective that I thought was like very rational and wise. He got a lot of blowback for it. And I respect people who have a perspective that they're consistent with. Like they hold that perspective, and it doesn't matter in what lens or what setting. Like they'll go to bat for that, even if it costs them social capital or whatever. So I respect that a lot. So I decided, you know what, like I don't even remember this why I was pissed. I'm just gonna unblock them. In terms of like commentary on our compensation, etc. So I think the specific thing you asked about is like private jets, etc. None of that's true. So we haven't spent any money on any of that. It's in my compensation package because there was a period of time this year that myself and my business partner thought we would buy a plane based on just the performance of our fund and our ability to collect tax write-offs when we take a distribution. And so I when I set that up, it was like, okay, well, if I buy a plane, I want to be able to use it, and I want to be able to use it for business purposes at Nakamoto, and I don't want to have to out of pocket pay for corporate expenses um, when I'm using it for business. But we ended up deciding not to buy a plane this year, and even still, like nothing has been charged or to the company, so like it's just not true. In terms of compensation overall, I think there's like some feedback that I think is fair, that like we're well paid. I think if you look at like compare our compensation packages to what's standard for a public company of our size, it's actually, just industry standard. I mean, we have a third party consultant who sets all of this stuff. I don't know what compensation packages are supposed to look like, but it's not a good look in light of the share price being way down. And like, I generally agree with the perspective that like the management should have aligned incentives with the shareholders, and like management should win when shareholders win, and management shouldn't win when shareholders don't win. So I agree with that view. And there's actually a really good article that is on this website, B Waters, I think is what it's called. They've written a whole series on treasury companies. I think it's very insightful, but they wrote one about just like, okay, what's the incentivization mechanics of a treasury company? Because the management team, if the incentives are not correct, they become a major drag on the performance of the company. And, like they might be misaligned with the interest of shareholders. And that article has really, spoken to me. And so, that's one of the things I'm putting time into, is to try to think through, like, if we rethought how we did our employment agreements, like, is there a way that we could redo them to be maximally aligned with shareholders? And I have some ideas, but it's like something that no one else has done. So there's no other company to point to be like, okay, this these people have done it right. So it's kind of like pioneering new ground. But like, yeah, I mean, when I look at all the treasury companies broadly, I feel like we set everything up that we did for Nakamoto to be as high integrity and legit as possible. Like that, like from the very beginning, it was like, this is going to be like an all-in bet from us. It should be done as high integrity as possible. So if you look at like a lot of these treasury companies, like when they set them up or found them, there's like a big allocation, 20%, 30% of the shares that are going to the management team. We didn't do any of that. In fact, people from our management team put cash into the transaction. So, if you look at like the total compensation for ours, it's massively below any of our peers. So not that our shareholders or like, not that the market cares. It's kind of like, okay, well, your peers are not the benchmark of whether you have the right structure in place for your own company. And again, like the stock has not performed well. So it's like I think it's very appropriate feedback. But I feel very strongly that like everything we did with how we set up Nakamoto was done with the absolute best interest of the shareholders in mind. And like I care very much about my reputation. I'm fine with getting roasted when I'm getting roasted for something that I believe in very strongly and I have my own personal views on. But like I don't want to be I care about my reputation. Like those items like getting roasted for ordinals, for example. Like I have a personal view on how Bitcoin should be used, or that we should allow everything to happen on Bitcoin that someone wants to do that's consensus valid. And so like I'm willing to get roasted for those things. But like I never want anyone to think that I've like scammed them or wronged them or defrauded them or misled them. Like that does matter to me. And when I look at Nakamoto, it's like it's like a buildup of 14 years of work, like a whole career, my whole career. And so I like there's no $1 million, like I get, maybe people miss this, like I already have a successful business. Like BTC Inc.'s already successful. I've been in Bitcoin a really long time. Like I'm not interested in destroying my reputation for $3 million. Like it's just like what are we even talking about? And so it does bother me on these things, but at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to you know change the perception of what we're doing at Nakamoto is like executing our strategy, doing what we say we were going to do, and having the results speak for why Nakamoto is a great idea and a great business. But it's tough, dude. I don't know if you see my Twitter. It's like every time I tweet, it's just boom, 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 boom. You're going to jail. It's tough.
Yeah, and I just want to remark that I did not get my Supra this year. The average pleb did not get their Lambo, and you did not get your private jet. So it's sort of
Yeah,
even
you're all making
across the board.
sacrifices.
We're all huddling and we're sort of wrecked, and we had higher expectations. I do want to ask you, like, every time there's bad news about Bitcoin, the price seems to react to it and it goes down. But it seems like the price became immune to good news. And I think it's a problem. And I think that we need new narratives, and we need to basically reframe the way in which we present Bitcoin to investors. I did see this week that some investors said that they sold because they're afraid of quantum attacks. And there are some other factors at play, like the battle between courtards and Nazis. I mean, that's also part of the reason why the overall mood is gloomy. And there doesn't seem to be the same sense of, okay, we're all in this together, let's make it work. I think over the last year we have seen a lot of factions forming, and it's been sort of destructive for Bitcoin. And my question for you is, what's the bullish narrative? What do you think is going to work?
So let me give you the bullish narrative. So one is that ever since I've been in Bitcoin, we have been captured by an ideological perspective that I had myself of the 4-year cycle, and that the 4-year cycle is the primary driver of the market dynamic, price dynamic. And I think we are right now at the stage of breaking the 4-year cycle. And when we which creates uncertainty, but when we escape from the parameters or the box that is the 4-year cycle, and we say, okay, well, now it could be an 8-year cycle. Now it could be, we need a new mental framework to determine like when is it going to be a bull market or a bear market. If the next 3 years were going to be a bull market, that would be the most bullish, story possible. Like breaking out of that ideological box, I think is an extremely powerful catalyst, because now how do you articulate the case for a bear cycle or a bear market to come? Like what's, why is this year good and last year, or next year will be bad? Like what's the explanation? What's the macro story that you're telling? So I think breaking out of that is very bullish. I think too, in terms of the core versus Nazis, communism, is that right?
Quartards. That's what Nick Szabo calls them.
Quartards. Okay. So yeah, it's been, unbelievable to watch from the sidelines on it. But there's been a lot of development in Bitcoin that has been frozen for a while. We've talked about this before on the show, actually, and there's a lot of extremely promising, exciting things that can be done and built with Bitcoin, things that people have been beating their heads against the wall for years to try to get. And the people that have been most resistant to that change, who have stopped it, are the people that are vastly disproportionately in the Knots camp. And I think that if there is a fork that happens here, which it feels like there's going to be, there's a lot of LARPing going on, but like this feels like BCH playing out all over again. It really just like the same.
No, it doesn't, because BCH actually made sense, right? They actually had a plan for scaling, and BTC said, well, let's use layer 2s. BCH said, no, we'll use on-chain. And now, ironically, BCH is going to have a ZK rollup as a layer 2, which is funny. Like, they spent all of this years. But I digress. These people were actually smart and had a plan.
I hear you on that. And there are smart people that, I think are part of this faction, but as the debate has rolled on, the quality of the commentary has just degraded to now we're in like crazy land, where it's like, okay, let's just like confiscate UTXOs of sorts. I was like, what's happening right now? So I think that if this group ostracizes themselves or exits the network to go work on their chosen fork, it's going to clean up the development environment within Bitcoin significantly and make it easier for us to advance forward on new soft fork proposals for Bitcoin that could, bring a lot of new features and functionality and utility to what Bitcoin's able to do. And so I hope that's what the outcome is. But it does feel like the status quo is unsustainable. I will say it is a little bit heartwarming that, even after all these years, the entire Bitcoin community can spend a year arguing back and forth the same talking points on the most pedantic, like tiny topic. It's like almost inspiring, like the limitless energy that the Bitcoin community has to argue. It's impressive.
Well, yeah, but there's gonna be someone who's gonna call you like a child pornographer or something, just because you believe that Bitcoin can be used in any way that sort of respects the consensus rules. And it's really sad. Last year we almost had consensus for Upcat. Then I think Rusty from Blockstream came up with the great script restoration, which was this idea to package all of the useful opcodes and put them into Bitcoin. And then we almost had consensus for CTV plus CSFS, and that was gonna be the way to go. It seemed like the redemption arc for Jeremy Rubin is finally playing out. Now he's in the Epstein files. Anyway, we never got that. And it seems like there's always a force that's trying to distract us from actually improving Bitcoin and building useful stuff.
Did Jeremy Rubin get in the Epstein files?
He is, yeah. He was exchanging some emails, like reporting to Epstein telling him, hey, I think he was getting funded as a developer or something, and he said, hey, I went to Japan and I just onboarded some kids to Bitcoin, kids as in university students. And he was like, are you around here? Do you want to hang out? Really funny. Like, I can send you the email if you want.
Oh man, poor Jeremy. Well, I mean, Jeremy's a cool dude, so I'm not surprised at all. And you know, that's too funny. Yeah, you know, a funny story actually. I won't say the who hosted this event, but I got invited to a party, my wife and I, while we were in New York, and you know, with an old friend of ours, and there's this DJ who came to town, and so they're hosting this event, and they give us the address, and we just go to it. And it's this like super sick house. I mean, it's like one of the nicest houses I've ever seen. And you know, we go inside, and it's like, wow, this place is insane. And the person next to us is like, yeah, it's so crazy they are hosting this party here. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, this is Jeffrey Epstein's home. I'm like, no way. So I gotta say, the guy had taste. He, you know, maybe he had some weird art picks, but the home itself was incredibly beautiful. Um,
I'm sure someone's
but yeah,
gonna
man,
take this
Jeremy
out of
Rubin.
context and publish it as a short clip and be like, oh, of course, this guy who supports, uncensorable Bitcoin use and likes ordinals, of course, he says that Epstein had good taste in furniture. It's like me commenting that
Yeah,
that Hitler was a good painter.
dude. You know, I saw like all this hate on Gloria, uh,
Zhao, yeah.
and yeah, and like they're just like clipping these interviews for like these 10-second clips when she's actually in some of them saying the entirely opposite thing of what they're accusing her of saying. Um, and you're probably right. There's probably someone clipping this right now, and they're you know gonna make some accusation against me after this interview's over. So thank you for giving them the idea, Vlad.
I mean, I did not push you into saying this. I'm gonna send you the email from Jeremy to Jeffrey Epstein. It's actually quite funny. And yeah, he's in the Epstein files. Someone actually forked Gmail and put the whole database of emails from Epstein on that fork of Gmail, and you can type keywords into the search box. And if you type Bitcoin, you're actually gonna find the first result is an email from Jeremy Rubin. Really funny.
Wow, wow, it's insane how connected Epstein was. It's absolutely insane. Like the you know the texts that have come out that I've seen. Like I saw the Larry Summers one, and it's like, dude, it like just staying on top of all these relationships, like separate all of the horrible crimes and all of the unethical behavior, but just like staying on top of managing all of these relationships this guy had. Like it's insane how he was able to like, you know, have so much influence over some of the most powerful people in the world. It's wild to see.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm allowed to be mean, which I have been throughout the interview, so I guess it's fine to say it. But you, as a Trump supporter, are you even allowed to talk about Epstein? Because it seems like it was a hot topic during the campaign, but after he became president, he sort of decided to not talk about it and say that there's no Epstein files.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I am allowed to talk about it, but you know, I don't really have much of an opinion on it. I mean, you know, my general view is that uh like there's lots of corrupt powerful people in the world, and this is why we Bitcoin, and all I really care about is having Bitcoin uh be widely adopted and driving towards hyper Bitcoinization, and everything else is noise. So I pick and choose my battles about what I care about or what I comment on, because like I got one mission. um
Yeah, I forgot to plug two of the ads, which I'm gonna do now, and then I want to ask you about your work more specifically. So there is Bitcoin.com news. I already mentioned them, and the reason why I like them is because they're orange. They used to be green and tell you that Bitcoin is expensive and slow, and you should use Bitcoin Cash. Now they're orange, and they have pretty. I mean, they have good journalism. They're not pro Trump as much as Bitcoin Magazine nowadays, and they're not as institutional as CoinDesk. It's a pretty nice middle ground sometimes to read about gold in it. It's not something that I think you will ever find in Bitcoin Magazine. So check it out. It's news.bitcoin.com for the URL. And there's also Unstoppable Wallet, which is one of the best wallets recommended by bitcoin.org. If you go to bitcoin.org and you go to the choose your wallet section and you go to mobile, you're going to see that Unstoppable Wallet scores very highly. And they have some very cool swapping features inside of the wallet, and it's non-custodial and very nice for Bitcoin. So check it out. It's free to download. Doesn't cost you anything to give it a try. Now, David.
Hey, I will say I like the Bitcoin.com team. Who was the guy who was running it early? The kite board surfer, Tomas?
I'm not sure. I don't think he's around anymore.
Mate. Tomas Mate. Anyway, and then there's a guy Gareth, I think, who's there now as well. It's a good crew over there. I like them. They're nice guys. I think they've built a really a nice portal, a nice business, and I really like that they've abandoned the kind of the Bitcoin Cash dominant angle, and they have like returned to, you know, actually promoting Bitcoin. I think they do a good job. Glad to see that that's a dual asset. I've always wanted to own Bitcoin.com. I've approached, or, you know, actually Roger redirected Bitcoin.com to Bitcoin Magazine for like 2 weeks. So like for 2 weeks I had access to it, and I knew the owner of Bitcoin.com before Roger bought it from him. And it really is like a great domain. But I've always told Roger, like, hey, if you ever like want to sell it, like, call me. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm interested. Like, I'm accepting offers. You know, minimum starting bid $1 billion. I'm like, come on.
That's
I'm
actually a good
interested, but
Roger
I'm not.
impersonation.
You know, so anyway, I talked to him the other day, by the way. He's feeling happy and rejuvenated, and you know, he had the old Roger pep in his step, I guess, you know, coming off of the settlement with the DOJ, and I'm very happy for him. I feel like it would have been a major miscarriage of justice for him to serve a life sentence over a discrepancy on tax liabilities.
Yeah, I agree. I met him in person this year in Spain. He was still under house arrest, I think. Not sort of house. He was allowed to leave, but he could not leave the island. I don't know what that's called. But he seemed very at peace. Like, a lot of people portray him as bitter or whiny or whatever they imagine he was like in 2017. But he's not that person. And he's also very reasonable. Like, you would not expect him, based on how he was presented in 2017 and 2018 and all the efforts that he made to say that BCH is the real Bitcoin, you would not expect him to be this chill and this nice. And he's like a proper gentleman. Like, he actually
No, he's one of the
served
nicest guys.
at the table. Like, he did not have to do that, but he actually offered to put, for example, fill the glasses and stuff like this. It's
No, I mean,
small gesture. He drove
there's a
me to
reason
the
why
airport,
he's
dude. Like, nobody's ever gonna believe me this, but I told him I have a flight in 2 hours, and he was like, "Oh, let me drive you there." I was like, "Are you serious about this?" Nobody's ever gonna believe me that I basically got driven by Roger Veer to the airport.
No, I mean, that's the type of guy he is. I think I've gotten 2 rides to him from him to the airport before. Like, he's just a generous dude, and incredibly kind. And people don't know how many hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins that he's invested into trying to make Bitcoin all it can be. And you know, as much as I disagree with him on BCH, and I've had so many frustrating conversations where I've like tried so hard to get him to like refocus his time and attention on Bitcoin. You know, he's as hard-headed as ever, but like it's because he believes in what he's saying, and he has a principled view, and I think it's the wrong view, but like at least he's consistent to fighting for that view. And like that's what made him early to Bitcoin. And if he didn't have those characteristics, he wouldn't be he would never would have even been here in the first place. And so I have a ton of respect for him, and I think he's he's lived an incredible life and journey, and you know, he's flown close to the sun before. I hope, he is using this opportunity to recalibrate a little bit, but very happy with the outcome.
Yeah. And also, like, he's really honest. People assumed that he was shilling BCH because he had some sort of financial interest, but that's what he actually believes in still. And he did something interesting. Him and Peter Risen and a bunch of BCH guys, basically they kept their BTC and they spent their BCH. So you should not feel sorry for them and be like, oh, these poor people, they mismanaged, they fumbled the bag or something. They kept their BTC and they used their forked coins for financing their operations. Maybe that there were some guys that actually sold their BTC for BCH, which was a bad move in hindsight.
A lot of people got wrecked on BCH. I mean, I know some people that lost hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin on BCH, but it is what it is. And now we have the benefit of history, and we can look back and we can learn from that whole situation. But while it was playing out, it was it was playing out. It was like we're living the experiment in real time.
I sent you a DM with basically Jmail, that's what it's called, Jeffrey Epstein. The email that Jeremy sent to Epstein. You can have fun reading it. Basically, what did I want to say about this before? Oh, yeah. So
he's making a comeback.
You predicted a fork that's going to happen. And I want to tell you my conspiracy theory about Bitcoin knots. Like, they're VC funded by a bunch of companies. A lot of them invest in Bitcoin. And I think that the long-term goal of this is to first of all compromise the censorship resistance of the network, because for a long time we have been saying that Bitcoin is permissionless and you can do whatever you want, and they're proving that you can sort of run filters on personal nodes, which in the grand scheme of things do nothing, but they do start a movement and they do get this militia to try to attack Bitcoin and try to say that it's not supposed to be censorship resistant. And now they talk about confiscation. They call it some sort of cleanup of the UTXO set. They say it's for efficiency reasons. But I think the long-term goal for this is to try to get Satoshi's coins. Like, if they can actually set a precedent for confiscating people's Bitcoin, they're going to go for Satoshi's coins for reasons which I think are existential to some of the investors, some of the institutions that got into Bitcoin, and they think that if Satoshi is alive and he's able to sell or put his coins on the market, that can actually crash the price, and they don't want it to happen. And I think part of the overblown concern with quantum is also a result to this, because some proposals for adding quantum resistance to Bitcoin are actually talking about freezing the coins of Satoshi so that they cannot be ever taken by quantum computers. And it's an interesting conversation to have, like, post-quantum, how are we going to approach it? Like, are we going to touch Satoshi's coins? Are we not going to touch them? Are they up for grabs for the first quantum computer out there? Or are we going to intervene in some way? Are we going to soft fork and allow everyone to move to new addresses that are quantum resistant? Or are we going to hard fork and everyone can claim their UTXOs on the new network? I think it's fascinating and under discussed right now because we're stuck with the Nazi versus courts hard debate.
I agree. It's under discussed. I do think maybe there's value in like, it's a contentious topic. There are people working on the topic, and the knots core debate has taken the attention off that topic. So and maybe that's a good thing, at least for now, as people are like formulating their views. my problem with is like I don't have any way to assess the quantum risk. I don't have enough expertise to make an independent judgment. I will say ever since I've been in Bitcoin, people have been talking about the quantum risk and nothing's materialized to date. So like that does, color me a bit skeptical. Um and there's lots of smart people that have told me they don't think it's ever going to be a risk. So I don't know. I do think, I actually I will say I reserve judgment on what's the right approach to handle making Bitcoin, quantum resistant, how to handle coins that, are not quantum safe. But like my general instincts are like we're building a 1,000-year monetary system. Like who cares if Satoshi's coins are like uh uh stolen, at some point in time. Like they'll they'll eventually transfer hands from the person who took them into the market. It might take us an extended period of time to recover from it, but like what's 4 years or 5 years in the scheme of 1,000? Like it's just I think there's a lot more damage in uh selectively uh uh like targeting, making UTXOs not fungible in Bitcoin. Like now they work, now they don't. And uh but consensus is a complicated thing. Bitcoin's an emergent system, and I haven't spent enough time to really study the solutions to have like a strongly held view. I saw Sailor's tweet today. I thought it was a very bold tweet to put out there. Um, but yeah, I think this is a I think in terms of like the price lagging, the best FUD that's out there right now is the quantum FUD, because anyone who's being intellectually honest, like, is not well positioned to be able to assess the claims. And so there's very few people that actually understand, what is the realistic risks of of quantum computing and where it is and where its trajectory is and what it's able to actually do. And so even though we may like brush the risk aside, like it's not really a qualified assessment of the state. And until we can have really a qualified discussion and we can say like this is like we can make a convincing argument, I think that fear is going to hang over the market until we do.
I agree with this. Like, there's no actual way to measure when the quantum computer actually becomes a threat, or which one or which specific characteristics are going to make it qualified. And the funny part is that if Satoshi's coins are moving, there's no way to know if it was actually Satoshi or a quantum computer, unless there's going to be some message after it.
I've always I'm trying to find where you are. I minimized the screen. Let's see. There we go. I've always thought that Satoshi signing a message um is like a really cool idea. And I feel like, if that ever happened, it would be like the message heard around the world. And it's kind of like Satoshi has this like superpower that like when he's or they are ready to say something, like they have this massive platform, this immutable platform that like hundreds of millions of people, use, and that like the whole world respects Bitcoin. I mean, even if you hate Bitcoin, you respect what Bitcoin has become and and what what it's already achieved so far. And so it's like when Satoshi speaks, the whole world will listen. It's kind of like it's a powerful thing.
I want to ask you something that will maybe get you canceled, not that there's not enough material already. Like, the Bitcoin maximalist narrative is that 99.9% of altcoins are scams, right? But the question is, what's that 0.01%? Like, maybe you're left out with 5 of them. And the question is, which ones are actually legit and they're actually producing some research or something that's useful for Bitcoin or for the cypherpunk ideals of having unstoppable internet money.
So first off, I think any coin that people find useful to them, like that's valid. And so like even though I think stable coins are dumb, there are people that find them useful and use them. And so like I respect that, and like they should be allowed and to do that. I also think that there are certain coins that are trying to do something that Bitcoin should be able to do. It has the ability to do, and I think in time it will do. But because of the social construct, like dynamics around Bitcoin development, it's not doing those things. And so, maybe there is a temporary window where something that's privacy related is useful, or something that I can't even really give you a like smart contract programmability is useful. But like, I think that almost all of those things can be achieved using Bitcoin or Bitcoin derivatives of other layers. The one thing where I really have like draw a problem with like the how we view tokens, and I feel like this is a much broader philosophical discussion, is like the issue is that like tokens are and were always securities, but because securities come with so many regulations and rules, the industry had this massive incentive to define their token as anything but a security. And so what that resulted in is like, as long as your token doesn't create any value, doesn't deliver any profits to shareholders, doesn't make any forward-looking projections about things that will be delivered, doesn't take any accountability for the management of the thing, you're good. And it's like, okay, well, that sets the whole thing up to be scams and bullshit. Whereas if we could just say tokens are securities and that's okay. And if you want to issue a security, that means that you need to take ownership, that you're accountable for managing the security, and that like you need to deliver profits to investors from like building a product that people want to use, and that you need to make forward-looking statements and make representations to your token holders, and you need to deliver on them, then like we would actually have tokens that are valuable. Like I actually think it's a super cypherpunk thing. Like the cypherpunk vision, it's not about just like decentralizing money. It's about decentralizing all the power structures of the world. And like if we could rebuild our financial system in such a way that anyone anywhere in the world can do whatever they want to do and use whatever financial tools they want, and no one can stop them, and it doesn't matter what jurisdiction they live in, like that's cypherpunk. And like one of the superpowers of Bitcoin is that it's money you can send anywhere to anyone at any time, no matter where they live. And so I think it's a sick idea that someone who lives in the middle of Afghanistan could come up with a cool idea or a product or a technology, and could go to the market via the internet and say, I have this idea, I'm going to go build this thing, and this is how we're going to make money. And then any person anywhere in the world could send them Bitcoin to fund that idea. And that idea could become the next Apple computer. And those investors, could become fabulously wealthy off of their investment. That's sick. Like that's capitalism. That's free markets. And like that's in fact like the vision of where this needs to go to. And so like I think the concept of a token as a security that's issued without the what's the right word? The legacy infrastructure that has existed for securities in the past, that's cool. And I think if that's how tokens describe themselves, then tokens would be valuable, because Apple stock is valuable, Google stock is valuable, like securities are valuable, like that those are things. And instead of all of these tokens going to zero, like a lot of it would go to zero, just like lots of businesses go to zero, but lots would not because they would go make money and be like businesses, you know, and so yeah, I think like we've demonized tokens when really what we should demonize is, you know, the lack of um uh integrity in terms of what they are. And, you know, I think the tokens that have held up the best are the ones that are the closest to embracing being securities. Like I think BNB is done well. I don't follow it day to day, but I think it's like near its all-time highs and it survived multiple cycles. Well, BNB, I think, you know, it's really driven by people using it as a way to pay fees on a product that they want to use Binance. And so it's kind of a proxy for cash flow, which is like a proxy of what a security is supposed to deliver. And so, you know, that model has worked. And so, yeah, I think like, and that's one of the things that I'm optimistic about from, you know, how crypto, like the one thing that crypto has delivered is like it got big enough where like the securities laws are about to change. Like legitimately they're about to change. Like it's like almost like if your bullshit can get big enough, you can change any law. And uh I think we are close to the world where you can just issue a security as a token and it's going to result in a 2 order of magnitude, maybe 3 order of magnitude decrease in the cost of creating and issuing and managing securities, and that's going to result in a vast widening of access to the global capital markets. And I think that's all good. And I think that's going to make the price of Bitcoin way more valuable because you know who I can't like if I want to fund the next Apple computer and it's going to be in the middle of Afghanistan, you know how I can't invest into that with my bank account. Good luck. Like you're only going to get access to those opportunities if you're using permissionless global money in the form of Bitcoin.
You sort of dodged the question, so let me address this directly. Maybe you need a spectrum or something like legit or scam or 1 to 10 or whatever. But basically, is Ethereum legit? You can use a spectrum, like from 1 to 10.
So I think any token that has legitimate organic users and has survived multiple cycles of, you know, massive price decline and recovery is separated itself into a higher quality tier than the vast majority of tokens that can't survive more than 2 years. But I would say that that tier is nowhere close to the level that Bitcoin is at. So, you know, Bitcoin's by itself. There's a handful that have had some staying power that I would put in like the B tier, and then everything else is bullshit. And I think that in the coming future years, there will be a lot more legit things that come because they're going to be built around being securities rather than being built as utility tokens. And I think that if Bitcoin can unlock its full potential, then Ethereum is done, Monero is done, Zcash is done, uh, Solana is done, Cardano is done. I feel like the Ripple scam will continue forever. I don't know how that's still around, but like so like I think Bitcoin will destroy the network effects of Bitcoin will destroy all these other um protocols if Bitcoin can fulfill its full potential. But like if Solana is going to become the platform at which like let's say all tokens move towards being securities, which I think is a completely legit thing. And Solana is the only place, or Ethereum is the only place that you can launch these tokens, and it becomes a platform for launching securities. Like that is actually a very valuable thing. And if Bitcoin is not going to deliver that on a layer 2, then people are going to use one of those other protocols. But they're using that protocol not because it has the best security model or the best system design or the best network effects or any of the things that make Bitcoin incredible. They're using it because they have no other alternative to do what it is they're trying to do.
Oh, I like that. Of course, Zcash, for example, is just the fork of Bitcoin with the Zero Cash protocol, which was on the cover of Bitcoin magazine in 2013. If you look at that cover, which has this anonymous character, it says Bitcoin privacy perfected. And that was, of course, from the Vitalik era of Bitcoin magazine, but that was part of the conversation at the time. If you look at the thread that presented CoinJoins for the first time in August of 2013, Greg Maxwell talks about zero coin and zero cash and says, until we get that soft fork, we can have this, which is sort of there but not good enough, but better than nothing. And it's interesting that we had this conversation and we used to be this cypherpunk and then we kind of forgot about it. Also, Ethereum was part of this Bitcoin 2.0 conversation. And that's where we had Counterparty, that's where we had Mastercoin/Omni, that's where we had a lot of proposals like NXT or
Color coins,
BitShares, yeah, colored coins. Nobody talks about many of these anymore. Ethereum is the one that won for reasons which I'll never understand because it was the underdog in this fight. But yeah, we don't.
Well, I don't think the battle's over. I don't think they've. I think it's a very long game, and like I think what victory looks like, we're not even. This is not even 1% played out. So I think it's premature to know, what has staying power and what doesn't.
I agree, and even Bitcoin is pretty young. It's gonna be 17 next month. It's kind of amazing how far it is right now, given that it's only 17 years old.
Oh, it's sick. It's incredible. It's one of the most interesting stories in human history, and it's got to be close to the most interesting story in human history. So I don't think it's quite there yet, but it's getting close.
So, David, you are one of the biggest advocates for Donald Trump as US president. I feel sorry I did not ask about this earlier during the interview, but I thought it was interesting that you mentioned Operation Choke Point 3.0, which supposedly is happening right now. And 2.0 was the one that was happening under the SEC headed by Gary Gensler. And what is 3.0 about? And I thought the whole point of voting Trump into office was to not have any more Operation Choke Point.
Well, Operation Choke Point 3.0 is a term that I completely made up in order to politicize this topic. I have no idea what the actual dynamics are happening behind the scene around the MSCI decision. I can tell you that being, working as closely as I have with Treasury companies, while there is a part of Wall Street that has really fallen in love with Bitcoin, and they Wall Street, like for better or worse, they love making money. There's very few places where you can make as much money as Bitcoin. And so as soon as you get a taste of what it's like, to play in the Bitcoin markets, Wall Street loves Bitcoin. And so there's a segment of Wall Street that's really embraced it from that perspective. But there's another segment of Wall Street that despises it. And they despise Bitcoiners, and they despise Bitcoin treasury companies, and they think that it's part malice, it's part gatekeeping, it's part jealousy. And like I saw it with Metaplanet. Like, Metaplanet was a dead hotel company that was tiny. In 1 year's time, they've become a top 10, top 20 most liquid stock in Japan. Some days they were the top number 1, top 3 regularly. And they have raised $3 billion of capital through this strategy. And, people had been trying to get an ETF approved in Japan for a decade. And people have been trying to get tax reform in Japan for digital assets for a decade. Zero progress, no interest in moving it forward. But as soon as Metaplanet started becoming the most liquid stock in Japan, as soon as it started raising hundreds of millions of dollars a month, every month for a year straight, now all of a sudden, hey, ETF in Japan is going to get greenlit. Hey, let's do tax reform so that, securities and digital assets are taxed at the same rates. The reason why they're doing those things is because they want to kick the feet out from underneath Metaplanet. Like they don't think Metaplanet should exist. They don't want Metaplanet to be in the Japanese capital markets, and they don't want Metaplanet to be successful. And so, that is an attitude that exists, and I think that is pervasive in all the capital markets. And yeah, it's like they're disgusted by us. Like they don't even want to see us. Like I don't know. There's people who legitimately really don't like us, and so it feels like that's where this MSCI decision is coming from, because it's not grounded in any factual basis. Like they are singling out digital assets as something that is fundamentally unworthy of being on a balance sheet, whereas goodwill is worthy of being on a balance sheet, or oil is worth being on a balance sheet, or real estate can be on the balance sheet. Literally any commodity, literally like any other asset effectively can be on the balance sheet, but this specific one they're going to treat differently. That's fucked up. And I think, at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is like, they don't want us, we're using the levers of power that they've been using for decades. And they don't like us having access to the same tools that they have. And they don't like us kicking them out of the indexes. Every time a company gets added to an index, they're replacing a company that was in the index that gets kicked out. Like when MicroStrategy got added to the NASDAQ 100, someone got kicked out so that they could get added. And so, if you're an investor in the company that got kicked out, it's like, what's going on here? Like these new companies that are in this thing that I don't believe in, they're cannibalizing the market that I used to own. They're cannibalizing my liquidity. They're cannibalizing my market capitalization. So yeah, I think it feels like this is a concerted effort to block our access to the capital markets. And, in the same way that the retail banks wanted to block our access to the banking system. And but that's not a Donald Trump thing. That's a Wall Street thing. And it's not a who's the SEC chair? It's not a Paul Atkins thing. These guys are fantastic. Like Paul Atkins is an incredible champion. And I think my hope is that the president and Atkins will personally get involved in this matter and let MSCI and the other indexes know that if they're going to single out and target Bitcoin companies, that they are actively fighting against the national interest of the United States, and they are actively fighting against America's dominance in this industry. And they are not only taking on an anti-American perspective, but they're taking on an anti-competitive perspective. Like Bitcoin is trying to compete with the banking system and the cartel. For the banking cartel to exclude us from access to the capital markets, it feels very self-interested. So anyway, I'm very thankful that we have the president in office, because otherwise who would speak out for us? Who would stand up to these people? And I can tell you, President Trump does not give a shit what Goldman Sachs or investment bank ABC thinks.
I feel like over the last year, you have gained a lot of knowledge about how the system actually works, and you went You basically graduated into the big leagues and saw what it's like at the very top, what the conversations are like. And I want to ask you, if you were given the position to be the quote unquote crypto Czar over the US, would you take it? Given the information that you know and the stuff that you know you can do.
Well, this is a thing that already I had to consider in the past, and um, I would not do it, and it's because um, to achieve things politically within an administration, uh, like you are not the executive, you are not the person who is the decider. You know, you follow orders, and like you have a lot of latitude, but you're following an agenda that's set for you. And politics, there are so many levers uh, that are used to get things done, where, you know, just because you're right about something doesn't mean that that is the thing that's going to happen, because that you're a lever that has to be pulled to make another lever go elsewhere. And so the type of person that I am, like I'm someone who likes to call my own shots, and doesn't want to wait for someone's permission to do something. I want to just go and do it. And I feel like the next 10 years are the most incredible period of time that's ever existed to build a business in Bitcoin. And I feel like um if I execute well on Nakamoto, I can create something that not only will be like my legacy of what I contributed to Bitcoin, but I think it can influence the direction of where hyper Bitcoinization goes in the future. And like and so yeah, that's I want to stay in the private sector and focus on building value there. um i I do think it is incredibly cool to do novel things in Bitcoin. And you know, the like if I was offered the job, not of the crypto czar, but if I was offered the job to build the Fort Knox of Bitcoin, um it would be incredibly tempting to be a part of that, because I think that's just a sick thing. I think that's something that's like, it's you're pioneering challenges that no one's ever even had to even think of or consider before. And that's cool. But like I think what we're doing at Nakamoto, I think we're gonna build something that in time, the portfolio of businesses that we're building will um have as big of impact on the world as the US Treasury does. And so, you know, that's that may sound a little bold, but that's my view. And yeah, I want to make it happen. This is the window.
Yeah, so why should anyone invest in Nakamoto today, given that people are so pessimistic and they say the price went down 99%?
Well, I'm not going to give anyone financial advice that they should invest in Nakamoto. Um, you know, if I were making the case to myself, uh, first off, on the surface, you know, we have 5,300 Bitcoins and we trade as if we have 3,000 Bitcoin. So I think we're like at a 40% discount to the cash value of the Bitcoin that we're holding, which is pretty incredible. You know, kind of an indictment of the market's views on me as an executive, that they're like, hey, you know, we're only willing to pay 60 cents for every dollar that you hold. You know, it kind of sucks. But, you know, I think why someone should care about what we're building at Nakamoto is because we have a vision for how to rebuild the global financial system on top of Bitcoin. And we are completely ideologically motivated to make this vision a reality. And not only does our team have the experience of being in Bitcoin for a very long time, I think we have one of the most OG teams assembled, but we have the creativity to imagine the world as it could be on a Bitcoin standard. And we will use the capital and vehicle that we have in a public company to manifest that vision into reality. And I think that we're going to push the whole Bitcoin movement forward. And, you know, you're just going to have to watch to see what we do. But like, you only have a chance like this one time to build a public company, to build a balance sheet of Bitcoin, to reinvent the monetary system and the financial system. Like all of these things are converging all in one place in time. And it's like this is a period of time that people will look back on for hundreds of years. And like the window to do something novel and pioneering is now. It's our generation. Like it's like we're the generation. If you look at who created the internet, it's all these people that were of the same age, 20-year-olds going into the 1990s. If you looked at who created the computer, it's the same thing. Like our generation is the generation that's going to create Bitcoin. And yeah, I mean, what's more exciting than that? So I think people should watch what we do, because I don't think there's anyone else who's going to take the type of chances and have the type of vision that our team has.
So let me put this differently. Why should people invest in Nakamoto as opposed to other treasury companies like 21 and a bunch of others which exist?
I wouldn't make that case. I think 21 is a very cool business. I think Jack Mallers also has a creative vision for what he wants to build. I think 21's a very exciting company. And I think Strive is also a very exciting company. So I wouldn't make the case that you should only invest into Nakamoto and you should not invest into any of these other things. In fact, I'm not even allowed to make the case that you should invest into Nakamoto. So I'm not suggesting that. But there are not very many people that have that type of approach. Like there's not that many Jack Mallers. There's not that many Adam Backs. There's not that many Michael Saylors. And so I think everyone should watch with earnest what these people do with the resources and tools that they have. And like when you're a shareholder in these companies, you're a part of that journey.
I will slightly jump to another topic, and I know you have to go because you said you can stay for 1 hour, and I sort of dragged it because I enjoy this a lot, even if maybe I'm boiling you in hot water.
No, this is easy. I've been boiled before, so but yeah, I always like coming onto your podcast. So anytime, man.
I love it. Like bringing you every year feels like you're going through such an amazing journey, and you have such an incredible and unique perspective on everything, because you're basically at the top and you're looking down upon us mere mortals, and you know a lot more than
No,
we
still
know.
to say it like that.
But
No, but
what
I
I
will
want to
say
ask you,
what I agree with what you just said is like I have gotten to see certain things, and the only reason I got to see those things is because I put myself out there, and I knew nothing about politics before jumping in with Donald Trump. Like I knew nothing about it. We just had a vision for what we thought we could achieve, and we figured out how to do it while we were doing it. Like when we went into it, we had no clue, and it was just like, okay, how do we do this? And I think great things come, and great experience and lessons come from just doing things, like just taking the chance and just doing it. And then like you don't need to have the answers to get started. You just need to discover them on the way.
Yeah, and I want to ask you something which is Bitcoin specific. Let's imagine that you have this magic wand and you're able to change something in Bitcoin and everyone's going to agree with you. Like, what's it going to be? Is it going to
Wow.
be scaling? Is it going to be contracts? Is it going to be privacy or quantum resistance? Only one.
Well, I feel like if I only get one, I would have to say what's Paul Stork's BIP called? BIP
300.
BIP 300.
Drivechains,
I
yeah.
would probably say I'd probably say BIP 300. So
There you go, Paul. This is the best endorsement.
yeah, not only because all of these things we talked about earlier, Paul would be like, this is why we need BIP 300, but also if we got BIP 300, then Paul would shut the fuck up about BIP 300 and he could go on and do other things. So but yeah, that might break Bitcoin. I don't know. I don't think it would, but it could. So probably for the best that we don't allow me to make that unilateral choice. But I do think that is one of those ideas that is extremely powerful and extremely creative, and would unlock so much potential uh, with Bitcoin.
I very much agree. And the reason why I like it so much isn't only the fact that you're bringing use cases from altcoins, which are legit, but also the security budget thing. Like, you're actually going to pay the miners for every transaction fee, which is not something that you get with Lightning or Liquid or even the new ZK rollups that are coming from Citrea and Alpen. Like, they're not going to give anything to the miners. So they're not supporting the long-term security of the system. And I think so far we were lucky because the price doubled every 4 years and the miners were sort of fine. Even if they're bleeding and they make some bad or poor decisions, they still were able to be profitable at scale. But once maybe you're gonna disagree with me. Maybe we're gonna double in price every 4 years forever. But I'm not sure after we flip gold if there is much left to go. And I'm not sure when that's gonna happen. Maybe you have a prediction about it. But there's gonna be a point where we do need to pay the miners in transaction fees, as Satoshi wrote in the white paper. And the question is how. And there's also this attack, quote unquote attack, that's coming from other networks that are cheaper. And people will say, well, I don't need my transaction to have this amount of security, so I'll just send it on Litecoin or whatever and pay a few cents as opposed to $1 for my transaction fee. And there's also Bitcoin Cash, which exists mostly as a blackmail and be like, oh, if you guys fail, we take the miners. I think that's the sole reason for its existence, to be there just in case something bad happens with BTC. So it's delicate. But I do like BIP 300 specifically because it pays the miners. It's something that is super underrated and something that we're going to have to consider more seriously after a few halvings.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Bitcoin can double for a very long time. And I think that the potential market capitalization of Bitcoin is way beyond the market capitalization of gold. And I think when you couple with it uh, humanity growing into the digital age, humanity growing into the AI age, humanity growing into the space age, the total addressable market for uh, the the galactic commerce is many orders of magnitude bigger than what our current GDP is. It's like comparing the GDP of the 1300s to the GDP of today. And I think Bitcoin will be the reserve asset and value system and money for all of humanity and all of the machine economy. And that means that I think the market capitalization of Bitcoin is equal to the value of all assets priced in Bitcoin. So that's to be said, like from a perspective of hyper Bitcoinization, I think that Bitcoin could go to you know, hundreds of trillions of dollars in value in today's realm. But I think Bitcoin will thrive in these new frontiers that are just beginning and have massive, massive room for growth and expansion. So yeah, I mean, I think maybe a better question is like, you know, a block is every 10 minutes. How much energy will go into finding a block? Do I think it's sustainable that the amount of energy to find a block will double every 4 years in perpetuity? And my answer to that would be yes. You know, like from the Kardashev scale perspective, like we have many, 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 many orders of magnitude to go in order to fully harvest the energy of our solar system. And so I think the amount of energy that it will be invested into finding a block of Bitcoin will be vastly greater than it is today.
Oh, that's super bullish. But let's just make a short-term prediction. Like during the Trump presidency, what do you think? You said there's not gonna be another 4-year cycle, and that model has broken. What's your
I think
prediction?
so.
What do you think is gonna be
Well,
sort of the
I
top?
think, again, I'm just going to return to my Twitter username, which is I forget what the price is that I have on there, but it's the market capitalization of gold is like the next target for Bitcoin. There really is no fundamental value-based analysis that can be done. You can only make a relative value analysis, and gold is the next comp. And the gold price has moved a lot, so I don't know what the total market cap of gold is, but it's north of 20 trillion. Like
It is
the
30
only
trillion right
rational
now.
30.
30.1 trillion.
Dang, wow, good on Peter Schiff.
Oh yeah, I should get him on the show. By the way, he has been.
Yeah,
I mean, I
behind the
respect him
scenes
more
in person,
nowadays.
he's a nice guy. No, he's a nice guy, and he plays a character. But I will say he roasts me publicly and he roasts me in private also. Like he'll everything he says publicly, he has no problem saying to your face too. So, um, but yeah, so like 30 trillion is like I think where Bitcoin is heading, which that would be north of $1 million of Bitcoin.
17x
So
from here.
yeah. So I think that's the target. I think it's some range, 30% below or 30% above. And I think that it's achievable in this administration. I think in 3 years' time, it's an achievable number. Um, I don't know if we'll get there in 3 years, but I know we'll get there eventually. So I just don't know how many years it will take, but I think it's an achievable number.
Wait, so we're at 88k, and I said 31x, so 88 multiplied by 31 means
It's 2.4 million.
$2.73 million per coin.
Yeah. Yeah. So, earlier I said I did think we were going to hit $1 million in 3 years' time. And now I'm saying we're going to hit 2.7 million in 3 years' time. So, thank you for doing the math.
Yeah. I'm going to interview again next year and see if we're on track for this and see basically if you're right about the 4-year cycle being broken.
Do you still believe in the 4-year cycle, or have you ever believed in it?
Not really, because, for example, the halving does not. So the latest one does not really affect the supply, but it seems to also affect the human psychology or the perception of this. Like everyone had expectations for this year because they add 4 years after 2017 and 4 years after 2021, and they're like, yeah, this year is supposed to be the big one, and then 2029 if we're going to follow the same pattern. I think there's something in these self-fulfilling prophecies and common beliefs, like sell in May, go away, which has been like a mantra on the stock market for a long time. And historically, if you sell in May and you buy back in November, you're better off. in some situations. But I'm not sure if the 4-year cycle is broken or not. I did make this claim of the super cycle 4 years ago, and that was wrong. And I try to minimize the instances when I'm wrong. I sort of hate it.
That's a good mantra. Well, I think the market structure has changed, and I think, you know, if think about the pessimism in the market right now, like there's a lot of pessimism. Like it definitely feels like we're in a bear market right now based on just the negativity that is out there. And we're sitting at $88,000 of Bitcoin. Like it feels like the same it felt like when we were sitting at $30,000 of Bitcoin.
Or 58,000 or 9,000 before that, which seemed to be like the eternal price. And we're not really
So
moving past that.
And like we had a really brutal sell-off. Like it was a very brutal sell-off and an immense amount of money. And like, we've been like tinkering around at 88K now for like what, a month? Like typically when we have these booms and like the last year of a 4-year cycle, like the bear comes on hard and heavy. And I don't know. I feel like the makeup of the marketplace and who the buyers are, it has moderated the upside and it has moderated the downside. And they are smoothing out the volatility of Bitcoin. But I think it's as inevitable as it ever was. I don't think the price booming and then crashing was the key feature set of Bitcoin needed for it to grow. And I actually think a more moderated growth rate and a more moderated decline actually widens the user base that is interested in holding that asset. I don't think most people have the risk appetite of early Bitcoiners. So we'll see. But like, dude, we're like, there's not that many times that in Bitcoin that you enter into an unknown and you get to learn something new about it. Like it happens every cycle. There's something like that, but like it's not that frequent that we find these new paradigms. And I feel like we're entering into a new paradigm right now. And new paradigms, do you watch Game of Thrones?
No, I tried to stay away as much as I could, especially when everyone was watching it. I was like, that's exactly why I don't want to watch it.
Well, you would say that. There's a saying that in the show that one of my coworkers likes to quote all the time, Brandon. It's
Let's go,
chaos is a
Brandon.
ladder. Let's go, Brandon. Chaos is a ladder, and I feel like a new paradigm. It creates chaos and it creates opportunities for new things to rise, and for old things to die. So it's always fun to see. So I think, yeah, we're entering a new paradigm for Bitcoin.
I would love to see it. Like, I would really love to see it. Maybe I get my Supra. Maybe you get your private jet. Maybe we're gonna live in citadels and have that utopia of. I've read so much fan fiction of what it's gonna be like that I sort of got sick of it. But yeah, it would be nice if it happened. It's just that it never really happens in the ways that we expect. And something that
True.
makes me pessimistic nowadays is that I discovered that the Twitter algorithms or X or whatever, they're putting you in a box and they make sure that if you type certain words or phrases, your tweets are not seen by other echo chambers. And I think maybe 4 years ago it was much more neutral and you could get something trending and people would see it. Now they made sure that you're basically locked in your own echo chamber and the news that you see in the news section are just based on your interests and not based on global trends. And it sort of sucks. And I do believe that tweaking the algorithms can actually manipulate market sentiments and can actually restrict the amount of information that normies are getting in regards to the positive side of what's happening in Bitcoin. And if we are not cutting through and we're not getting there with information. And this also has to do with the purpose of Bitcoin Magazine and every media organization in the space. It's going to be problematic because ultimately the goal is to reach mass adoption one way or the other. And it sort of sucks that we only rely on institutions. I don't see too many people nowadays talking about buying the dip and all of these memes that we used to have 4 or 5 or even more years ago. And this is what worries me about the whole movement. Like, part of the spirit is gone, and we're also not helped by social media platforms which use AI.
Well, I think you know, the watering hole of Bitcoin dying is not new. And I think Twitter is dying as it relates to Bitcoin. And you know, Reddit died, the Bitcoin Talk forums died. Um, you know, the platform where Bitcoin happens has evolved and will continue to evolve. And I think, you know, as it relates to the culture, you know, the reality is like we make the culture, like you make the culture. Like all the people who participate in Bitcoin, they make the culture. And you have to make the culture that you want to what's the saying? Like uh 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 make the change you want to see happen in the world,
Or
or
be the
I
change
forget
that
what
you
it
want to
is.
see.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like be the culture that you want to exist in. And um yeah, I mean, like a citadel is not just going to happen. Like you have to make the citadel happen, and you have to go out into the world and find the places that you can advance Bitcoin happening. And it's up to you. You know, it's up to each of us individually, but someone else isn't going to deliver it for you. And you know, I think it's the time has come that we have to leave the digital arena and just existing in the digital realm, and we have to build and compete and fight in meat space. And we got to do it in the boardrooms. We got to do it in the capital markets. We got to do it um, in the White House. We got to do it uh, uh, every place we possibly can. So yeah, man. I mean, it's a long slog, and we got a long ways to go. So you got to just have the endurance to grind it out.
And let's not forget about the local meetups and trying to make Bitcoin popular as money, which seems to have taken a backseat to the whole pristine collateral asset or digital gold or whatever. Like, we're supposed to make this work as money. Even if we sort of pivoted from one narrative to the other, the goal was always, even after the block size wars, to make Bitcoin work as
Bitcoin
money.
is money.
Yeah.
Agreed. But I mean, I use Bitcoin as money.
I can
I mean, do you
attest
use
to
it as
that.
money?
People don't know this, but I helped you buy the Twitch account at Bitcoin like 5 years ago. It was
Yeah,
from this
yeah.
weird dude, and he wanted one BTC when the price was like $9,000 or something. And the story is that he wanted to send me like 5% of the deal, and I felt like I don't deserve it, and I asked you to send it to a charity, and you sent it to the Free Ross campaign. And in hindsight, I'm very proud of it. It worked out well.
No, I mean, that's one of the things I like about the treasury companies too, that I think is underappreciated, is like, uh, you know, Bitcoin for a cup of coffee doesn't make sense right now. Bitcoin to buy a $10 million company or investment or property does make sense. And you know, you're using Bitcoin as money on your balance sheet. And uh, you know, Nakamoto uses Bitcoin all the time. And I think like Bitcoin treasury companies are going to use Bitcoin as money. And um, you know, right now I think it makes sense for the bigger ticket items where the marginal cost of doing something is, you know, tiny relative to the value of the transaction. But yeah, dude, I mean, I think you don't need someone to tell you Bitcoin is money to just use it as money.
Yeah, of course. But of course, narrative matters. Narratives matter. And I remember on the stages of your conferences, people were talking about regulations and saying that once we get regulations, we're going to have proper adoption. But we don't really see that playing out. If anything, it seems like the stable coins have taken some of the market share of Bitcoin for payments. And I think it's pretty unfortunate. This is not the future that I want for Bitcoin to be just a collateral for borrowing stable coins or whatever. I think it's just a phase, or at least I hope it's just a phase in the grand scheme. And we're actually gonna pay with BTC. In Europe, it only got worse. I'm not sure if you're aware of what's happening here. But we got Mika,
Yeah.
which is an adaptation of the travel rule that you have in the US. And you got to get a license if you want to accept Bitcoin. And a lot of companies decided to not pay the 100K for getting a license. They were like, screw this, we're not going to accept Bitcoin anymore. So the adoption has gone down. And next year, the European Union wants everyone to report all the Bitcoin that they hold in self custody. And I think that's a huge honeypot and a big policy failure.
No. You don't think that's a honeypot? Not the European government. Surely they wouldn't do anything wrong.
Oh no, it's never going to get leaked, right? I mean, just look at the country of the president of the ECB and what's happening with kidnappings and whatever. It's only going to get amplified.
Yeah, man. I think Europe's in for a tough few years ahead. Yeah, it's a disaster there. And but I do think Bitcoin is going to be part of the solution of what comes next in Europe. And uh I think, like, you know, again, you know, chaos is opportunity, and when the European Union implodes, which it will, and the Eurozone implodes, um it will create chaos, but what comes out of it I think will be something better. So uh but we'll see.
Yeah, you seem pretty confident about some points, but I'm not going to argue them. It's too late. It's 2 in the morning here. I'm still happy about the conversation. I wish I could ask you more stuff, but I see you getting tired too.
Yeah, I'm tired. It's been a long day. But uh I'm going to the White House tomorrow for a Christmas party. So I hope I'm going to get to see the president, and I'm going to shill him on the samurai devs. So, you know, what do you think, if there's one argument you'd make for the samurai devs, why they need to be pardoned, what would it be?
I don't think there is one argument for them to be imprisoned in the first place. Like, they wrote open source software. Their mistake, according to the court files, is that they used speech in a way that some government officials don't like. And they said stuff like, hey, Russian oligarchs, you can use samurai or whatever. So if they were more careful and said, well, privacy is for everyone, they would not be in this situation. And it's very silly. Like, I don't think there's any evidence that they did anything wrong. I don't think they did anything wrong. They hate my guts. Like, I was on Team Wasabi for a long time, and they attacked me, and they called me names, and they made me, you know, the subject of memes, and they slandered me. But I still don't hate them to the point where I think that they should be wrongly or wrongfully imprisoned. I
What
think they
was
should
the
be.
what was the thing that Trump said during the election, where he was like, he was being asked about the emails being hacked or something from the DNC. He was like, Russia, if you have the emails, you know, uh like he said something, and then they try to, like, you know, accuse him of conspiring with the Russians. Maybe that's the angle. It's like, you know, they're Russia Gate 2.0 gets the samurai devs.
If I can
No,
just
but
be the devil on your shoulder because you're potentially gonna meet the president, there's also this guy Curtis Green who was on my show, and he was the admin on the Silk Road. And he did not go to prison per se, but he doesn't have his civil rights, and he believes that he was wronged by the government, and he deserves to carry a gun and vote if he wants to. So he does want to get
I'm
a
not making that
presidential
ask.
pardon too. I'm just informing you about it. I know it's tough. I know it.
I know Curtis. He's reached out to me a few times. I don't know his history with Ross and what he that you know, I don't. That's a whole other situation, but yeah. Well, dude,
We own the
thank you for
politics
having me
now,
on the
right?
podcast. Yeah, at least for 3 more years. I'm gonna get some sleep. Enjoyed coming on the podcast, and dude, let's do it again. Let's not wait a year.
Yes, sir. And best of luck with Nakamoto and
Thank
BTC
you.
media and everything else, because it's tough out there. I know it must be stressful, but you're doing a pretty good job in spite of
I
what
mean,
the
dude,
market thinks.
you know, even if like if I could take a time machine back and I knew all the pain that we were going to go through this year with Nakamoto, I wouldn't change a single thing. Like, I'm doing something that is hard, but it fills me with a passion and purpose that makes me enjoy life. And that's the same thing that I've found in Bitcoin. And what more can you ask for than that? So thank you for having me on. Keep following along with what Nakamoto's doing. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Ciao.